Hey, mamas. Welcome back to another Friday episode here on the Knit Your Stress Away podcast. Here is another Knit and Tell episode for you. Today, I have a few things that I want to talk to you about. One thing actually came from one of our members in our community. So I want to answer this question on the podcast. I think it's really fun to get into things that people actually need to know in real life as they learn to knit or as they continue mastering their craft. So let's dive in. Welcome to Knit Your Stress Away. Are you a mom who feels overwhelmed, craving a creative outlet, but unsure where to start or how to fit it into your already packed day? I have dedicated this podcast to help you discover practical, guilt-free self-care strategies through the calming practice of knitting. I'll help you break free from the overwhelm, quiet the noise and comparison of social media, empowering you to pick up your knitting needles instead and embrace moments of rest, creativity, and mindfulness. Hi, I'm Nadine, a mom, wife, and passionate knitter. I first learned to knit as a teenager from my grandmother back in Germany, but for some reason, I put my needles down in my 20s. It wasn't until 2020, when everyone was searching for ways to ease the anxiety of the unknown, that I picked knitting back up, and something amazing happened. I found peace and joy in the cozy, calming rhythm of knitting, and now I'm so excited to share my practical tips and habits with you so you can reclaim your time, recharge, and rediscover the things that bring you happiness. It's time to ditch the endless scroll on social media and focus on what truly matters, your well-being. So if you're ready to take control of your stress, ditch overwhelm and social media comparison, rekindle your creativity, and recharge with a hobby you love, this podcast will guide you every step of the way. Take a deep breath, grab your knitting needles, and let's start creating a life with less stress and more joy, one stitch at a time. Hey mama, are you dreaming of learning to knit so that you can have the amazing benefits of this craft in your life too? You might be feeling unsure about how to start, but I've got you covered. Download my free Essential Tools checklist to see exactly what you need to get started with ease and confidence. If you want knitting to be your new way to relax, I'm here to help you make it simple and stress-free. To grab your checklist now, go to theknittingmamas.com/checklist and kickstart your knitting journey today. Hey, welcome back and happy Friday. I am Nadine Medina, your host here on the Knit Your Stress Away podcast. And we're back for another Knit and Tell Friday, which is a more laid back episode where I talk about my current projects, where we talk about things that people may have needed help with, and just, a tip or two from me when it comes to your knitting journey and how to make it a little bit easier. So today I have a few things that I want to mention to you. Number one is actually a question that was discussed in our Facebook community. It's a free group that you can join anytime you like to learn more about knitting, to get started, to get support from other mamas as well. You can get into the group by going to theknittingmamas.com/group, and we'll see you on the other side. But as I said, we ask questions in there, we answer questions in there, and this question was already answered in the group, but I still wanted to bring it here to the podcast because I thought it might be an issue that some of you guys face, especially as you're starting out. The second thing I want to talk about is how to avoid overwhelm as a knitting beginner, which is something that a lot of people struggle with. And I am the last person who wants you to just throw in the towel and say, oh gosh, okay, this is too much. I'm done. I don't know how to do this. So let's talk about that a little bit. And then after that, I'm just going to kind of update you on my personal projects that I am currently knitting. Also, you may be able to tell my voice is a little funny. I went to King's Dominion with my kids, my family, last weekend, and it takes me like 5 days to get past the screaming on the roller coasters and what it does to my voice. So please excuse me. I waited all week, basically, to do the recordings for the podcast for this week, just to make it easy on your ears, because it was pretty bad the first and the second day. So bear with me here. Okay, so the thing that we discussed in the community, in the Knitting Mamas community, was how to cast on your stitches in a way where they are not too tight on the needles, so that first row that you knit after you cast on your stitches is not as hard to knit as it would be if your stitches were really tight. So the trick that I learned from my grandma when I was little, because I had that same exact issue, and I remember, okay, I wasn't that little. I was in like high school, but the thing that I remember too was that I was just pulling everything too tight. And if you already are a tight knitter, you might notice this issue as you knit your stitches later on in the project. But specifically when you cast on, there's actually a few ways to get around that. My favorite way is to, instead of using just one needle while you're casting on, you actually are going to grab both of your needles, hold them together, and cast on your stitches onto both needles at the same time. And you might be like, wait, what? Like, why would I do that? What it does is it actually makes the loop, the size of both needles together. So it's double the size as what you normally would get when you cast on with just one needle. And what you want to do if you're using both needles, you want to make sure that your stitches while you're casting on are pulled pretty tight, just to avoid that they're actually too loose later on. And then once you're done casting on, and here's the fun part, here's the trick, you're just going to pull one needle back out. And then you'll notice that you have a much looser set of stitches on that needle initially to start that first row. It makes it so much easier for people who have already a pretty tight tension when they knit. So I highly encourage you to try that out if that's something that you're struggling with. For me, I have started casting on just one needle. I used to do this all the time because like I mentioned, I had that issue of too much tension while I was knitting. And I still am a pretty tight knitter. So this also comes into play when you knit your gauge for your project, your little gauge swatch, because two people could knit literally the same exact gauge swatch for the same pattern with the same needles and the same yarn, and they still might end up with two different sizes. And that is all just because of the way they knit, and if they knit loosely or more tight. And this is just another reason why you do always want to have your gauge swatch knitted before you start a project, because even though you're using exactly the tools that it tells you to use in the pattern, it still might differ from what the pattern says, or, you might have to up or downsize your needle in order to meet the gauge. So the same kind of comes into play when you cast on. You may have issues with tension when you cast on. So try this trick. It works really well. The other way is literally just to not pull your stitches as tight as you're casting on, but I find that sometimes just easier said than done. So try the double needle trick and see how that works for you. I would love to hear if that worked for you over in the Facebook group. Just make a post in there. And yeah, I can't wait to just chime in and see if there's anything else that you need with that. So we're a free group. You can hop in there anytime you like if you need support with your beginner knitting projects. Okay, next up, I wanted to talk about how to avoid overwhelm as a knitting beginner, because I think that can really sneak in very, very quickly, that you think, you have to either do everything at once, or you just get totally confused about the pattern and what the abbreviations mean or whatever else. And then you just kind of like, oh my gosh, too much. And you just drop it all and you let go. And I don't want you to do that. Like, I don't want that for you, because I know there's so much benefit to this craft on so many levels, not just your, wellness, relaxing, stress, mental health benefit and aspect, but also, creating things, being creative, having a creative outlet. All these things are so good for you. I do not want you to feel overwhelmed and then getting literally the exact opposite out of your knitting practice, which is overwhelm, frustration, whatever else in that department, and then just kind of like ditch it all and say, nah, that wasn't it for me. So I'm here to help you with that. I'm here to help you with that at any time. Over in our group, we're welcoming, any questions that you might have, any frustrations. And please also attend our Knit and Chill circles, which are live meetings that we do once a month. The next one is on Friday, the 15th of November. It starts at 1 p.m. EST. I'm on the East Coast, so it's always going to be EST. If you can make it to that, you can bring your project, you can ask your questions. We're here to help any beginner knitter. So my biggest tip, I think, for avoiding overwhelm as a beginner in this craft is to I just want to encourage you to focus on mastering one thing at a time. You do not need to know everything at once. It is definitely not necessary to know a whole bunch of things in order to actually start knitting. What does happen often is that we see all these beautiful patterns and these beautiful things that people are making, and some of them might actually be much simpler than you expect, even though they don't look simple, but others might very well be. And as much as I love getting inspiration from those things and I love looking at them on Instagram or, on websites, I also need to know my limit, because I too don't want to, get frustrated and overwhelmed with things that I may not have mastered yet in this craft. So little by little is really your best bet. And what I would personally recommend for you to start with, if you are a total beginner, is number one, you need to know the tools that you need and the tools that are really good for a beginner. So I highly recommend and encourage you to download the free checklist that I have on my website, theknittingmamas.com/checklist. You can download that for free, and it has everything on there that you need. In fact, I highlighted the things that you absolutely need in order to be able to knit, and then everything else that's kind of bonus, but also very helpful to get started. And after that, you want to learn how to cast on, and then you want to learn the knit stitch. Those are the three things that you need. Everything else can come after that. You also want to learn how to read a pattern, because there are little abbreviations and words that may not be very familiar to you if you're a complete beginner, and they can be very confusing at first in order to really get out of the pattern what you need. So once again, start very, very simple. Don't start with everything at once, and please do not pick a very complicated pattern or very thin yarn. So start small and then work your way up is the best advice I can give you in order to avoid being overwhelmed as a beginner knitter. I have something super fun coming up for those of you who are ready to get started, who are like, yep, I got my tools, I need to start. You can Google this, you can go to YouTube, you can find all kinds of amazing videos, but you can also stay tuned, and I have something really fun coming very, very soon. So stay tuned for that. Okay, let's pivot now to my personal projects. I actually just finished the beanie for my husband. You may have heard me talk about it here on the podcast. I've also been posting it on Instagram. At the time of this recording, this may be a little delayed. I have just finished it, and I am so excited because so now, hear me out. I picked up my knitting needles again after like a over 20-year break back in 2020. So we're talking like 4-ish years, right? 4 or 5 years, depending on, I don't remember exactly when in 2020 I picked them up. So it's a little over 4 years, but that's how long I've been knitting. So it's not super long. And I do try to challenge myself with new things, but I'm also a person who likes to pick up multiple projects at once, and I like to pace myself because I don't want this to be a competition with myself. This is supposed to be something very relaxing and fun and joyful, and the things I create, I want to love them. But I also have told you before that I have zero problem with making mistakes in my projects. I think they add uniqueness. I think they add just, like for the most part, uniqueness to the project, but also it shows your progress, right? It shows that you're trying, and it isn't something that I think is bad at all whatsoever, because we're all learning. And most times we're the only people who actually see the mistakes. But I am very excited to report that after 4 years, I just finished a project that had 0 mistakes in it. And I couldn't even believe it myself. But is it any better than the other ones that I've made? No. There was no difference. And funny enough, it was a very small project. It was a beanie. So it's not, there's not a lot of room for mistakes, if you will. But I didn't even drop a stitch, even though I was knitting with the double pointed needles, which is like 5 needles at the same time. And it's a little tricky. But I was just like, wow, okay, I made no mistake in this one. Interesting. So it took this long. And again, no shame if I am making a mistake. I'm completely okay with that. But I thought it was worth mentioning so that you can also feel better and say, okay, if she makes mistakes, then I can make mistakes. And it is not a big deal. I'm still knitting. I'm still here. I'm still making things, and I'm still challenging myself. So keep doing that. I still have not finished the sweater that I have been working on this fall, or this, I guess it was in the summer I started it, then I let go because I did something else. And I just kind of like switch back and forth between projects, which is why they take a little bit longer. And I think I'm going to pick that one back up before I'm starting another cardigan that I have also lined up, which I'm really excited about. I shared a live video in our community the other day, and if you're going in there today, you can actually catch the live video, but I was showing the yarn that I'm using, which is like it's not necessarily self-striping, but it's a yarn that has different colors, and they just kind of switch back and forth, so you don't have to switch the yarn in order to switch colors. It is going to look really adorable. I love the colors. They're very fall-ish, like a deep purple, kind of like a burnt red, orange. There's a brown in there. Like it's just really gorgeous colors, and I can't wait to see how it actually comes together with that yarn. So that's what I'm currently doing. I'm probably going to start something else along the way, knowing myself. I also think I want to make that same beanie that I just made for my husband for myself in a different color. So I'm going to post all of the links to these patterns that I'm mentioning in the show notes so that you can grab them there and you can have a look at them if you like. The cardigan that I'm making is actually a free pattern on lionbrand.com. Super fun. They have some free patterns, and then all you need to do is go either to Michael's or to their website and just grab the yarn if, you want to use the yarn that is actually mentioned in the pattern, which as a beginner, I highly, highly recommend because it makes the process just a little bit more smooth. All right, guys, this is all I have for today for this gorgeous Friday. Well, the day I'm recording it, it happens to be a Friday as well. Isn't that so funny? And it is a beautiful day. And I hope it's a beautiful day as you're listening to this as well. It may not be a Friday when you listen to this, but yes, I wanted to once again invite you into our free community, thenittingmamas.com/community. Come join us over there and join the conversations and all the fun about knitting. And also, if you're ready to start, go grab that free checklist over at thenittingmamas.com/checklist. If you're not quite sure if knitting is for you, congratulations on listening to this entire episode, first of all. But if you're still like, I'm not sure, you can take the quiz. It's super fun, and it'll figure out for you if you're actually ready to start or if you still need a little bit of time to figure that out. And you can find that at thenittingmamas.com/quiz. All right, guys, this is it for today. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will talk to you next week. Have a wonderful weekend. Thanks so much for hanging out with me on today's episode. I hope you're walking away with a bit more inspiration and a few ideas to make your self-care a priority. If today's chat gave you a little boost, I'd love it if you could leave a 5-star review on iTunes. This helps other moms discover the podcast and start finding more calm and creativity in their day as well. And don't forget to join us over in the Knitting Mamas community on Facebook by going to thenittingmamas.com/group. Thanks again, and remember, you deserve time for yourself to recharge and feel your best. Catch you next time on the Knit the Stress Away podcast.